in the student waffle, there was a barrier to democracy that couldn't be cooked along with bubblegum or the fancy peppers that you might put on if you're in the doldrums and you want to see something fancy. And when there's a whippoorwill that's going around in a whirlpool, then every 15th bread maker has to put his dogs in a hostel. And sometimes when you're retired, you don't know how to make the letter F. And those times somebody might visit you and ask you to spell out your surname. And if there are glyphs that you can't approximate, when your duodenum is full of an engorgement of roasted chicken, then getting the pen in your hand, you're going to feel all fumble-fingered. And you're going to feel that the ends of your extremities are like huge corncob pipes. And we all know that the corncob pipe is emblematic of Popeye. And so if you see, you could look at his extremities and the bulbous nature of them. And when you take that into account and you see how many tires do Mormons put on camper vans, then you find there's an extenuating circumstance to all of the jibes and japes from the jackanapes. And there's a wheel of persistence, and it's turning, and it's intermittency. You can see that persistence isn't necessarily constance, but persistence is renewal, and renewal implies gaps, implies, if you will, lacuna. And to take these intentions and intentionalities out of the realm of the whisper campaigns of diminutive hinterlands, it's the stillness that we want when we whistle. And to take an infallibility like the 12 orbs of ratiocination and to put them into a storage container that might fit inside another storage container, or might dwarf the first or the second storage container, in which case there would need to be some sort of jostling or jury rigging to make sure that the kind of storage that you have meets your needs. And those things take one or two tries until they're fully pliant, until they reach the pliance that you want from a wall that you're punching with brass knuckles. And different people want to see different things. If you want to see dents, then you need a metallic surface. If you want to see chips and fracturing, then you need some sort of brick or drywall. And personally, I would prefer the chips and the fracturing, because the parts that are left on the ground you can bring to your dentist. And at the evidentiary hearing, there's going to be a kind of marbleized malintent. And to call something that's emotionally frictive marbleized isn't to ignore the disconsortium between the surfaces of what could be called hope and what could be called fear, but rather to observe that there's a swirl, and the swirling means that if you're navigating at the level of a hypochondriac, then you're going to see 2 or 3 ferns in your grotto. So it's kind of something you might want on a commemorative plate, right? And the colors or the etchings or the draftsmanship on these things at best are garish, and at worst are enfeebling. You gaze upon them and your eyes decide to quit their functions and give you a pink slip and say, no, thank you, you're fired as an owner of eyes. You don't get to own sight any longer. And then that makes you sad. So the knick-knackery that is plaguing us in such abundance comes to fruition with the implanting of a reciprocal urge to generate further knick-knackery until there's a kingdom of knick-knackerdom, and it leaves all of us nicked and knackered. And the surfaces that chip, actually, they can cause abrasions, but they can also, if you run your hand along a surface that's been miscorrugated, it will cause a fissure in the ranks of your flesh that don't have corporals and ombudsmen. So that's something to be married to an apostle of the Godhead that we mix with chicken. And to return to the topic of the recipes and the appetites for eating God or consuming a divinity, and all that implies, because at the least inspected end of the transaction, there's an excretion of God. To consume God is then to, first of all, have God in your offal, and also to have God in your excreta. So what does it mean if we've put God in the toilet by pumping him out of our butt? I'd say that's a good metaphor for the sorry state of over-apprehended lactation policy. And I can't deny that there's an avuncular carbuncledom that wouldn't really reappreciate what it hadn't formerly put in the dishpan. And I think that we could have a referendum on wheat, and it might come out better than a epistolary domicile. And to find the chinks in an armor that nobody bought before they were fully embosomed is kind of like criticizing a goalpost for not being a fence. Thank you for listening. Comments welcome.